The most famous whiskey blender in Scotland pours a measure of single malt, swirls it, raises the glass, says hello to it out loud, and then throws the whole thing across the carpet. Richard Patterson has opened tastings that way for decades, and if you saw my video on his method, you know the ritual. But watching it again left me with a question nobody ever asks these people. That is the show. What happens at home at the end of a long week when the cameras are off and nobody is watching the legend pour? So I went digging through years of interviews, and the answers are better than I hoped. Today, 12 whiskey makers and the bottles they actually drink at home, every one of them sourced from the maker's own mouth. A Scotch legend who openly raves about a $50 Kentucky bourbon. A bourbon icon who spent decades recommending a bottle his own son says he never once saw him drink. And the man who makes the most hunted bourbon on earth, mixing his flagship with an ingredient you will not believe. Stay for number one, because the ritual gets even better when you know what is in the glass. Number 12, Elizabeth McCall, Woodford Reserve. Elizabeth McCall is the first woman ever to hold the master distiller job at Woodford Reserve, and one of the youngest distillers in America, a distillery whose entire brand is polish, crystal decanters, horse country elegance, the official bourbon of the Kentucky Derby. So when she was asked how she takes her own bourbon at home, you might expect a lecture on glassware. Instead, her answer is the most relatable in this entire video. "I just pour it over the rocks," she said. "I am a bourbon on the rocks girl. That is it. No Glencairn glass, no water dropper, no ceremony." The woman responsible for one of America's most elegant bourbons drinks it the way most of America drinks it, over ice, about $35 a bottle, 90.4 proof. She rarely drinks anything neat unless it is something special, and outside the house it is bourbon on the rocks or a glass of red wine. If anyone ever makes you feel small for putting ice in your whiskey, you now outrank them by exactly one master distiller. Number 11, Shinji Fukuyo, Suntory. Suntory's chief blender is the fifth person to hold that title in over a century of Japanese whiskey making, the nose behind Yamazaki and Hibiki, bottles that sell for hundreds of dollars. His personal preference, in his own words, is a highball. "Quite relaxing for me," he told an interviewer, and that is the whole answer. Whiskey, soda, ice, tall glass. And in Japan, that is not a compromise, it is a craft. The Japanese highball is built with the same care most people reserve for cocktails: good ice, gentle soda, minimal stirring, and it is how millions of people there drink whiskey every single night. He has also said that when he drinks at home, he concentrates completely on the whiskey, no television, no conversation, just comfort first and then the drink. You can copy his serve tonight with Suntory Toki at around $35, and you will be drinking exactly like the man who blends Hibiki. Number 10, Fred Noe, Jim Beam. Seventh generation of the Beam family, still the master distiller, now working alongside his son Freddie, the eighth generation master distiller of the family's experimental Fred B. Noe distillery. Fred's home serve from his own mouth goes like this. In the summer, bourbon with a little ice and a splash of water because it makes it refreshing. In the winter, the same thing with a little less ice. And which bourbon does the seventh generation Beam reach for? "I enjoy the Jim Beam Black, the Devil's Cut, and Knob Creek," he said, "but I drink them all." The heir to the biggest bourbon dynasty on earth happily pours the $20 Black Label. There is a lesson in that sentence that half the bourbon collectors on the internet still have not learned. Number 9, Booker Noe, Jim Beam. Fred's father deserves his own entry because Booker Noe invented barrel-proof bourbon as we know it. He was a giant of a man, 6'4", Jim Beam's grandson, and in the late 80s he started bottling whiskey straight from the barrel, uncut and unfiltered, first as gifts for friends, then, when demand exploded, for sale, at a time when everyone told him nobody wanted bourbon that strong. Booker's, the monster that routinely lands over 120 proof, is named after him, so you would assume the big man drank it neat and laughed at the rest of us. He did not. Booker's own house serve was something he called Kentucky tea. 1 part Booker's, 4 parts water in a tall glass. The inventor of the strongest bourbon on the ordinary shelf diluted it further than any bartender would dare. He knew something the proof chasers refused to accept, that water opens whiskey up, and that the man who makes it has nothing to prove to anybody. Number 8, Rachel Barrie, Glendronach. one of the most decorated blenders in Scotland, responsible for Glendronach, Benriach, and Glenglassaugh, and her home drinking runs on a 2-speed system. For slow sipping, she says her favourite is always Glendronach, savoured for its rich, sherried character. Regular viewers know the 15-year-old made my list of the only 10 scotches I would ever recommend, and the 12 delivers most of that dark fruit for around $70. But here is the honest part. For easy drinking, she takes Glenglassaugh with sparkling mineral water, a master blender spritzing her own single malt. And asked for her desert island bottle, she picked a 50-year-old Glenglassaugh, which she called the luscious taste of single malt paradise. Sip the serious one slowly, lengthen the easy one, and stop treating every dram like an exam. Number 7. David Stewart, the Balvenie. More than 6 decades at William Grant & Sons, the longest-serving maltmaster in the history of Scotch whisky. Stewart joined as an apprentice in 1962, straight out of school, and stayed until 2023. And along the way, he pioneered cask finishing itself, the now universal trick of moving matured whisky into a second cask for a final flourish. Every port finish, sherry finish, and rum finish on your shelf owes him a royalty it will never pay. His personal favourite is the one he built, the Balvenie Portwood 21-year-old. "This is my favourite Scotch whisky to drink as a treat on special occasions," he said, praising the sweetness of raisins, sultanas, and dates, and a balance he calls just beautiful. At around $300, it is the priciest bottle named so far. And honestly, after 6 decades of service, if anyone has earned an expensive favourite, it is the man who invented the finish that half the industry now copies. That is the first half, and notice the pattern already forming. Ice, soda, water, $20 bottles. Now it gets stranger because the second half includes the single most surprising drink order in American whiskey and 2 Scotch legends openly in love with the competition. Number 6, Harlon Wheatley, Buffalo Trace. Now for my favourite answer in this entire video. Harlon Wheatley runs the stills at Buffalo Trace, the distillery that makes Pappy Van Winkle, George T. Stagg, Eagle Rare, and Weller, the most hunted shelf in American whiskey. People camp outside stores for his products. And when Forbes asked him years ago what he actually drinks, he said this: "My favourite drink is a Manhattan, made with his favourite bourbon, which is not Pappy. It is standard Buffalo Trace, the $28 flagship. And then the detail I refuse to let you miss. If it is available," he said, "I sometimes substitute vanilla schnapps for the sweet vermouth." Read that again. The Pappy maker drinks his cheapest bourbon in a cocktail with vanilla schnapps in it. Somewhere a collector who paid $3,000 for Pappy 23 just felt a cold shiver and does not know why. Number 5, Jim McEwan, Bruichladdich. Almost 40 years at Bowmore, then the legend who rebuilt Bruichladdich from a rusting shell into a cult distillery. And when an interviewer asked about his favourites, Islay's most famous son started naming other people's whiskey. "I love Mortlach," he said. "It is my number 1 Speyside. Talisker is another. Mortlach, which viewers of my Only 10 Scotches video will remember, and Talisker, made by his competitors at Diageo, praised without hesitation by a man who spent his whole life on a rival island. He did allow himself 1 private indulgence, a pair of casks of his own 1990 vintage Ree racked into barrels that once held Chateau d'Yquem, the most famous sweet wine on earth, which he described as totally wicked. But his everyday loves belong to the competition, and he says so out loud. Number 4, Bill Lumsden, Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. The director of whisky creation behind 2 of Scotland's biggest names, and off-duty his liquid passions run well beyond Scotch. By his own account, they are traditional British cask ale and fine wine, which he collects. When he does pour whiskey at home, recent picks include a Mortlach gifted by his son and Diageo's Linkwood, which he calls consistently excellent, both made by his competitors. And then, the line that matters for everyone watching this in America. Four Roses Bourbon, he said, particularly their single barrel series, is hugely underrated. One of the most powerful men in Scotch whisky, pointing at a $50 Kentucky bottle at 100 proof and telling the world it deserves more respect. If Four Roses single barrel is good enough for the man who makes Ardbeg, it is good enough for your shelf. Number 3. Eddie Russell, Wild Turkey. Second generation of the Russell dynasty. A man who all but grew up at the distillery and has now spent more than 40 years working alongside his father. His answer starts loyal. Wild Turkey, he will tell you, runs in the family blood, and his associated home pour is Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, the family's 110 proof pride at around $65, non-chill filtered because the Russells refuse to strip anything out of it. Away from home, he admits he will drink a cocktail made with somebody else's bourbon, the occasional tequila, even wine. But there is one line he will not cross, and he named it Jack Daniels. In his words, "No self-respecting Kentuckian would ever do that. I am not touching that fight. I am simply going to leave it here in this video and let Tennessee and Kentucky sort it out in the comments." Number 2. Jimmy Russell, Wild Turkey. Eddie's father, the longest tenured master distiller on the planet, more than 70 years at Wild Turkey and still walking the rickhouses. His answer is the purest in this video. "All of it is bourbon," he said. "That is all the alcohol I drink. I am not a beer drinker or a wine drinker. His only other beverage is iced tea. His ritual is lighting the grill, taking one sip of bourbon, setting it down, putting the steaks on, and picking it back up. And then there is the story that makes this entry special." For years, whenever Jimmy was asked what he would drink if not Wild Turkey, he always gave the same answer: Elmer T. Lee. Collectors took note, because Elmer T. Lee is a $40 bottle that now sells for over $100. But his son Eddie finally told the truth. Elmer T. Lee the bourbon was named after Elmer T. Lee the man, a rival distiller and one of Jimmy's oldest friends. "I have never seen him actually drink a bottle of it," Eddie admitted. "He was just being nice. 70 years in whiskey, and his most famous recommendation was an act of friendship." Number 1. Richard Patterson, the Dalmore. And back to where we started, because the man with the flying first pour gave the most complete answer of all. More than 55 years in whiskey, the legendary master blender behind the Dalmore, the man whose nose was famously insured for $2.5 million and who has assembled some of the most expensive Scotch ever sold at auction. The ritual you saw in my earlier video is real, and he does it everywhere. Swirl the glass, say hello to it, ask it how it is doing, throw the first pour away, then hold the sip on your tongue while he counts you through it. But the bottles behind the theatre are the honest part. To relax, he reaches for a 14-year-old from Wolf Craig, the new venture he blends for. Soft, elegant, and refined in his words. Late at night with friends, it is Dalmore King Alexander III, his own $300 masterpiece. But then he keeps going and names Balvenie, Highland Park and Laphroaig, 3 whiskies made by 3 rival companies, and explains that the choice always follows how he feels. "Whiskey is all about emotion," he says. His father taught him to hold the glass properly, swirl it, bring it up and say hello. And he has been saying hello for over half a century to whoever made what is in the glass that night. So what did we actually learn? The people who make the world's most celebrated whiskey drink it over ice, in highballs, in Manhattans with vanilla schnapps, cut 4-to-1 with water, and very often they drink the competition and praise it by name. Not one of them gatekeeps, not one of them drinks the way whiskey snobs insist you must. And look at the price tags. Leaving aside a handful of special occasion bottles, the everyday pours these people actually reach for: the Woodford, the Toki, the Beam Black, the Buffalo Trace, the Four Roses, the Russell's Reserve, all sit between $20 and $70 from people who could drink anything on earth for free. The makers are telling you, in interview after interview, that the good stuff is the stuff on the ordinary shelf, served however you enjoy it most. The only rule any of them follow is the one Patterson gave us, that the whiskey follows the mood. So pour what you like, how you like it, and if anyone questions you, tell them the man who makes Pappy is at home right now drinking a $28 Manhattan. Tell me in the comments which answer surprised you most and which master distiller you would want to share a pour with, because I read everyone and the comments always shape the next video. Subscribe if you want it.